on media and human development. I also want to thank Barbara O'Keefe, the Dean of the School of Communication, for helping me establish the center and actually naming it as well. And Barbara is going to be with us for the day too. And I want to thank all of you for taking the time out of your own very busy schedules to join us for what I believe is an incredibly important and under-examined topic. A year and a half ago, the Kaiser Family Foundation released the results of their 10-year study of media use among children and youth ages 8 to 18. One of the key findings of that study was that minority youth consume 13 hours of media content a day, nearly 4.5 hours more each day than non-minority youth. The fact that minority youth consume more media than other young people do wasn't really a big surprise. In fact, if you go back to some of the very earliest television studies in the 1950s, they found that black children watched more TV than white children did. And with every new medium that has come along, whether it's video games or computers, iPods, cell phones, iPads, that same phenomenon has been true. But now, since there are so many new media for young people to use, and so many new ways to access those media at home and on the go, the amount of time that all young people spend with media has really gone through the roof. And the gap between white and minority children has grown exponentially. In fact, the difference between the amount of time white and black youth spend with media has doubled over the past 6 years, and the gap has quadrupled for Hispanic youth. So we decided the time was right to push a national pause button, to stop and take a moment to look at those differences, to bring together some of the best minds in the country from a whole variety of disciplines, to come together and explore just what these differences are and how children from different demographic groups use media, what we think is behind those differences, and where we think those trends may be heading. And given everything we know about the negative correlations of media use with various health and educational outcomes of young people, and the great topics and great hopes we have for using media proactively to help address health and educational disparities among youth, we want to think about the implications of media use for minority youth and consider what each of us in our own realms, whether we be content providers, media executives, educators, parents, public health professionals, what can we do to respond to what we are learning about the differences in the way young people use media? When the Kaiser Family Foundation decided to end its program of research on children and media, I was pleased to be able to team up with Vicki Rideout, who had directed their media research program for many years, to explore the issue of racial and ethnic differences of media use in much greater depth. So today, she is my co-author. We're pleased to share with you our new report on children, media, and race, the first report ever to examine the totality of young people's media use by race and ethnicity. And I want to say a special thanks to our colleague and third co-author, Alexis Lauricella, for all of her work analyzing the Kaiser data, preparing the report, and organizing this conference. First, a word about methodology. The results are based on new analyses of the data set from the Kaiser Foundation's Generation M study and their earlier study of media use among children from birth to age 6. We went back through both studies and we reanalyzed each finding by race, and unless otherwise noted, all of the findings we'll be presenting here are based on the more recent Generation M data among 8 to 18-year-olds. The Generation M data were collected by Harris Interactive in 2009 among a nationally representative random sample of more than 2,000 students ages 8 to 18. There were significant subsamples of African American and Hispanic youth. Because there was a smaller sample size for Asian participants, we were able to conduct many, but not all, analyses for this subgroup. Because race, socioeconomic status, and family structure can often be conflated, the first thing we did was to conduct a series of analyses to re-examine the relationship between each of these variables and our media use measures. Specifically, we looked at parent education and whether the child was from a single or two-parent household. These analyses indicated that across each of the media use outcomes, race was a highly significant predictor and had by far the largest effect size. Indeed, Neither parent education nor family structure were significant predictors once race was controlled for. The first chart simply shows the difference in total media exposure between white and minority youth. And as you can see, Black, Hispanic, and Asian children consume a very similar amount of media each day, about 13 hours worth of media, while white children consume considerably less, at about 8.5 hours. Although that is still obviously a very substantial amount of media each day. One of the biggest differences we found is that minority youth are especially avid adopters of new mobile media. While white youth are just as likely as other kids their age to own a cell phone or an iPod, but they spend a lot less time using them than minority youth do. So for instance, if we look at the amount of time young people spend using their cell phones, iPods, and other handheld devices to play games, listen to music, or watch TV and videos, so this doesn't include time spent talking or texting on a cell phone. Minority youth spend close to 3 hours a day using mobile media, compared with 1 hour and 20 minutes a day among white youth. But for all their love of new media, it is the traditional medium of television that still dominates all young people's media consumption, especially Black and Hispanic youth. Black and Hispanic youth watch about 1 hour more live TV each day than white youth do, and white youth spend considerably less time than minority youth do watching TV on new platforms like online or on mobile devices. Altogether, Black youth consume nearly 6 hours of television content a day, Hispanic youth nearly 5.5 hours, Asian youth more than 4.5 hours, and white youth about 3.5 hours. Black and Hispanic youth live in more TV-centric homes. They're more likely to have the TV on during meals than white or Asian youth. And they are more likely to have a TV in their bedroom as well. And these differences that we saw among are similar differences that we saw among some of the younger children. But when it comes to computers, Asian youth are much more likely to have a computer in their room than other young people. And they spend nearly 3 hours a day using a computer outside of schoolwork. Hispanic and Asian youth spend the most time on social networking sites and are more likely to have created a profile on MySpace or Facebook. For all the differences in the ways that young people use media, we also found a number of important similarities. For example, about half of young people across the board say they have looked for health information online. Young people also report spending a remarkably similar and surprisingly small amount of time using the computer for schoolwork, just 16 to 20 minutes a day, as compared to anywhere from 1 to 3 hours for a day for using the computer for fun. Not much surprise there. And they spend a very similar amount of time reading print, surprisingly only about a half an hour per day. And finally, white, Black, Hispanic, and Asian youth are equally likely to use more than one medium at a time, what we call media multitasking. This chart illustrates the percent of 7th to 12th graders who say they use another medium most of the time. They're listening to music, using a computer, or watching TV. And multitasking has been a phenomenon that's been going up for the last several years of the Kaiser Family Foundation studies. So, why does any of this matter? We believe it could matter a great deal. There are an abundance of data indicating that media are an important influence on young people's development, on issues ranging from gender roles and ethnic stereotypes to violence, sexual activity, and obesity. And a growing body of research has indicated that media can play a significant role in promoting early childhood literacy, revitalizing educational curricula, and communicating critical health messages to children and adolescents. There is no other activity that young people devote as much of their daily life to as they do to media, and its place in their lives is still growing. As we consider the impact of media use on children, the types of messages they are exposed to, the information they learn, the people and products they connect to, and the creativity that new media afford them. It's important to understand the variations and similarities in their media habits, and that's what we hope to explore today. We need to do everything in our power to ensure that media are used to help address health and educational disparities among young people, not exacerbate them. Thank you very much. I'm a little ahead of time, so I'll be happy to take any questions that you might have.
I have a mic here. If anybody has a question, I will bring you a mic.
I was just curious if, I'm Sonia Greer from American University, I'm in marketing. And I wondered if the differences that you mentioned, if they're significant differences, if you
Yes,
tested them for that.
absolutely, yes, they are significant differences, statistically significant.
And in fact, there were a lot of things that looked like differences that were not statistically significant. And that's particularly the case with the findings among Asian American youth because the sample was smaller, so the tests had to be harder. But yes, I think it's really important to do those kind of reliability tests.
Sandy?
Under Calvert, Georgetown University. Ellen, did you break this out by gender, sex at all as well? Did you cross-break this?
Alexis? We didn't. No, we didn't look at gender within racial groups, no.
Okay. I just think it might be some also insights, you know, because there's a lot of male-female differences historically.
Yep.
I think that's really true, and one of the challenges is with the sample size. So when you get down to breaking up the size, I mean, I think we probably could look at male and female for African American and Hispanic, but you couldn't do it within age groups too. So it's challenging. It's challenging. Yes.
Hello, Felix.
Felix Gutierrez, Annenberg School, University of Southern California. Given the attention that we had earlier in this decade in the 90s about a digital divide between children of color and people of color and whites in media use, does this study put that concern to rest? Is that something behind us?
I think that the divide when you talk about access to technology has certainly gone away. There may be differences of a divide in terms of the kind of content that's used and the conditions of those use, but I don't think these data are any different from more recent studies that have looked at access points. And it's absolutely the case that we are a society that where families believe that technology is important for their children, and at ever increasing ages, if we're to believe the news stories about the pass-back phenomenon with cell phones and babies. So yes, I think that access is certainly, doesn't appear to be a divide any longer, and the question is, are there differences in the kinds of content that are attended to and the kinds of uses that are put to technology are put to.
I think Vish wanted to make a comment on that, if that's okay.
Yes, Vish.
Actually, what's happening with the digital divide is we are grossly underestimating. The national surveys cannot accurately estimate digital divide. If you take a very close, granular look at what is happening in terms of access to internet as well as using the internet, the difference continue to persist among different social groups and among different classes. But the national surveys cannot capture it because, and I was going to make this point later anyway, people come in and go out of internet. They get off the grid and on the grid based on their ability to pay the bill in any given month. So in fact, the division is persistent and quite disturbing. And in fact, the national NTIA report clearly showed that the division exists in terms of both broadband access, for example. So I think we need to take a much more close, granular look at some of these things.
And Vish, is it primarily in access via mobile media to the internet?
It's a variety of media. It's both. The NTIA report talks about broadband medium, obviously, so that's the focus. But in terms of cell phones, for example, what the national data don't capture is, again, how they pay for the cell phone on any given month and lose connections in the next month. So that kind of those kinds of data are not existent, at the national level. But we found them in our closer analysis.
Terrific. Thank you.
Do you want to do
one more, Michael?
Hi, I'm Mike Thomas from University of Wisconsin-Madison. I was just wondering to what extent this is based on self-report data?
The survey, the Harris Interactive Survey, were questionnaires that were handed out to students in classrooms, so yes, they are self-report data.
Just to add to that, though, the way we did it is we asked them about the previous day, and we so that it wasn't just in a typical day, how much time do you spend, and we also broke the day up into separate day parts, so we had them think about what TV shows they watched in the morning the day before, for example. And in fact, we even gave them their local television listing from their community that day before and had them circle any show that they watched part of, and then think about how much time they spent watching television. So we were using some visual prompts and so on to try to get the self-reports to be as reliable as possible.
And we have some validation work from Dan Anderson that those are some of the best questionnaire measures you can use.
Ellen, I think we have time to take one more question, and then we're going to hear from Commissioner Clyburn.
Indeed.
So if you want to pick who you want to.
Right here, Jessica.
Hi, Jessica Gonzalez from National Hispanic Media Coalition. I'm curious if there's any ability to use this data to look at differences between immigrant youth and non-immigrant youth.
I don't believe that that was one of the measures that was collected, so no, I'm afraid we can't. Why don't I see if we're waiting for Patty Miller to come in. And here they come.